So what I'd like to do is focus on Joseph Felix Sr. He's born in 1824. And my journey took me to his name. And I show his family up here. He was very well educated. He actually spoke 5 different languages. He was a sugarcane farmer, like many of the Falcons, and of course, like many of the Islanos in the area. However, after we found out, several years later, reading some articles written in the 40s and the 50s, that several families left Donaldsonville after the Civil War. There was a battle there. There was 2 major battles, I come to find out later. The first one devastated the town of Donaldsonville. It was shelled by the Unions, mainly because the Confederates were picking them off from down the river. And the Unions didn't like, the Union side just didn't like that. And they decided, oh, we're going to go in, we're going to take care of this Confederacy, this piece. And so they shelled the town, and the stories you can read about people fleeing the town are pretty graphic. So I find out later he moves from Donaldsonville with other families, one of them being the Moore families, who were a little bit further down the river. And they settle in an area called Rayne, Louisiana, which is on the other side of the bayou, which is where closer to where I'm at. They moved across. He did the same thing. He married his cousin, as you can see. In his first marriage, he married into the Rodriguez family, but by the time 1858 came around, my family told me that she was so ill, and she didn't even get to know her 4th child, Rosalie. She was so bedridden and sick. So he, being a farmer and couldn't take care of the family, decided to ask Marie to come over and, come take care of the children. My wife is sick and there's no way she can help with the 4 children I have. And so Marie comes over and starts cleaning and taking care of the kids and doing all the mom-related things, right? And so it was fairly natural after Dolores passed away, he married her. It just was out of convenience, really. She's much younger than him. She was born in 1843. And he dies in 1899, a prominent man in the Acadia, Lafayette area region. They end up having a lot more children, as you can see here. And as you can see the cousin marriage here. And I want to point to Jean Falcon at this point as one of his children of the 2nd marriage. He did have a diary of his daily activities, which was also interesting. We uncovered that. We have found where that's at. And I actually have copies of his diary. He wrote in 1858. And before the Civil War, he would write in Spanish, all of his property, and he kept a ledger of all his materials. And then he'd flip the page and write it in English. He'd flip the page, write it in French, flip it in Portuguese, and then flip it and write all of it. He knew 5 languages. It's very impressive. Very, very impressive. Yes.
How did you find that record and where is it located?
That one, I found it in many places. One, Frank didn't show up today, did he? He's not here. Okay. Frank Falcon Jr. is one of my relatives. And he was the last Falcon. His father was the last Falcon. He's one of the last grandsons of Joseph Felix. And he lived in the old Joseph Felix house. He told me stories of the stuff that was in the attic. That was amazing. I wish he was here today because he'd share some of that. But he knows where that book resides. But then somebody in the 80s had made a copy of it and put it in a binder, and I have that binder. She passed away. Her name was B. Falcon. She was in Rayne, and she passed away, and she gave me the piece. It's very hard to read. You'll see a picture of it. I stare at it, and I've been told what it is, but I can't make out anything. So you may be able to make out some of it. I don't know. The other copy is actually at the University of Louisiana Lafayette. It's on microfilm, and you can ask for it. It's on this miscellaneous roll with a whole bunch of other uncatalogued pieces, and I ran across it and found it. It's actually a pretty good copy. It's probably better than the Xerox one I have. So. And that's Marie, his 2nd wife. She's the oldest Falcon I have a picture of. This is her taken in the 30s. So she would be the great-granddaughter of Gaspar. That's the house they lived in. She spoke French, and she would only speak Spanish if you wanted to know, if you didn't want, she didn't want you to know what she was saying. There's some great stories about her. I put a few of them here. She was hiding something. She would, speak in Spanish. She would sit by the fireplace with that big apron. And I got this interview from Stephen Falcon, by the way, who's passed away. He was in his 90s when he told me the story, because he remembers when he was a little kid having to go kiss her every time they visited the house. He would tell me that the kids would have to line up to kiss her, and they dreaded that because she always had dip in her mouth. And she'd wipe it on her. She'd wipe it on her apron, and she thought nobody would notice if she, she'd kind of float away off her apron into the fireplace. And they recall seeing, the juice run down, and she wore a long dress, and but she was a very kind lady. He said she loved the children, and they all loved to come to her. So he vividly remembered that in his 90s, and he'd tell me that story.
Oh, wow.
I love this. So, and they settled in Rain. So at this point, all their kids, for the most part, are in Rain. This is actually his journal entry, one of them in 1858. I went ahead and scanned it and cleaned it up a little bit. It's not all that clean. It's really tough to read some of it because it's just been worn down. It's a Xerox copy. So he ended up becoming Justice of the Peace in the late 1880s for this new town called, Crowley, in this new parish called Acadia Parish, which was part of St. Landry at the time, and then recently. And so there's one of his documents, Joseph Falcon, down there, written and signed in 1889. So he became a very prominent person in the parish at that time. So I'm uncovering all this thing. I mean, I started probably, in 2002, 2003, I was in grad school, so I know by that time I was definitely busy looking up things, visiting a lot of libraries and places, archives, centers, and things like that to find what I can. So over this period of time, all before 2007, I'm uncovering things, little things. I'm going to families' homes, I'm bringing recording equipment, I'm bringing my scanner, and I'm interviewing these people, and I'm saying, tell me the stories, and what can you remember from your grandparents? What did they tell you about your family? Do you know these people? Do you know how they died? Do you know how they lived? What did they do for a living? Those are just questions, and then you put the tape recorder down and just let them talk. And people love to talk about family. It's so easy. I don't do any work. I just press record and say go. And they go, and it's great. And I go home, and then I spend a lot of time digging through it all, putting it together. So, here are their children from their second marriage. And this is the closest I can get to knowing what he looks like, because the grail, the holy grail for me is to find a picture of him. He died in 1899. He was a prominent man. There's got to be a picture of him, and I have yet to run across it. So, still searching through people's old picture books and things like that. You have a box of pictures and things. I go through them and try to figure out who they are. So here's some of his children. And this is the closest of what Falcon would be. And I have to look at these faces hard and go, this is a product of two Falcon families, Cristobal and Gaspar. If I want to know what they look like, look real hard right here. Look real hard. I'm going to take a look, I'm going to focus a little bit on Jean at this time. And go on a little further. Oh, I'm not going to go through dates and places. I mean, you can read it, but I figured that would just kind of bore you, and I definitely can't go through all the trees, so I'm going to just cover a few. Jean, that's him and his wife right there. And this is the first time I have in my lineage that they marry outside of Islam. She's a Hewlett. She's not Spanish. And in the 40s, they had a family reunion. I think it was actually their, at this particular time, it was one of their anniversaries. I want to say like 50th anniversary or 40th anniversary. I'm not quite sure. In those pictures down there, and you can see them with all their children. And that's them sitting down there. So he was wealthy. We know Jean's father was wealthy and educated. He was a prominent man, but he didn't educate any of his children, and we don't know why, even though he was. And Jean decided, well, I'm gonna build a school on my property, and we're gonna educate my kids as well as the neighbors' kids and the people around that particular area. So he was very focused on that. I think that's what made the difference in their livelihood. And you can see from their kids, they were doing fine in these pictures. They had children on the right side over there. I've actually met Ollie and Lawrence before they passed away. I was able to interview them. They were born she was born in 1910. Lawrence was in 1918. I got to speak to them and get some of their stories as well. So that was really unique. On the right side, I'm going to focus on Edward. He was born in 1907. And that's him and his wife, Evelyn. She was a Hanks. They were born in Crowley, so they moved a little bit outside of Rain. And if you've ever bought Cajun country rice, stare real closely at the bottom of the bag and it will say Falcon Rice Mill. He owned a saloon, he owned a bar, but nothing was as successful as his mill he started in 1940, 41, I think it was. He started the rice mill, and that's a picture of it down in Crowley. So if you ever buy Falcon Rice, you now kind of know where that comes from. So you may have seen that before. They have some children, and Randy up there, born in 1950. Well, that's my dad. And that's me. So that's me and my wife on the left side. That's my sister, she's a Falcon. That's Melanie and her husband, and that's my dad. If you know Wayne Toots, if you know Jamie Bergeron, and that in the middle right there is Joel Saunier playing Falcon accordions. If you've ever seen a Falcon accordion, or if you've ever seen Wayne Toots, and you may have heard him play music, that's my dad's accordion.
That's what?
That's my father's accordions. My father makes accordions. If you've seen those, that's him. Yes, ma'am.
The Trahans in Crowley?
Yes, ma'am. Same.
Now, that's your
That's my uncle. Miss Mona Trahan, that's his sister. Mona Lois at the top up there. So Charles Trahan, that's her.
We know Robbie.
Of course, that's my cousin.
Is that your cousin?
That's my cousin.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
We've been trying to figure out how we're related.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's my cousin. As of recently, yes, they've taken over the mill, and he's running that Crowley trail. So that's a little bit of my line, and this is all I knew up till about 2007. I can trace me all the way back to, well, on the left side, from me all the way up to Christopher, right? And I thought that was kind of neat that I was able to get that far, and just with those three sources. And then in 2007, I get this email. It is from a man asking me some questions about falcons in Louisiana, not uncommon, and he says he's from Grand Canary. I was always told falcons were from Tenerife. Andrew, who's a real knowledge about the falcons around here, had assumed that they had come from Tenerife as well. He pushed a book from these routes as well, and you were familiar with them. And I read that book. I have a copy of it now, and I've dug through it. But this man was from Grand Canary telling me, oh no, almost all the falcons are from Grand Canary. Oh, wow, that's kind of unique, you know. What do you know about falcons? So he goes, oh, well, I researched them. I go on the island and I am one. And so I was tracing my own genealogy. How are you connected? Because he wanted some information from me. And I said, well, all I know are these two brothers. And this is about the dates. And I have no idea what island they come from. I can't tell you anything about them. They died in this town here on this river. And he's like, And I don't hear from him for a while. And this is really all I have. I mean, it's true. I had the manifest list. I had some census records showing their names. I thought that was kind of unique, 1810 and 1820. But I also had the land plot showing where they lived. And naturally the Diocese of Baton Rouge records that show, the children of Gaspar and Crystal. And here's a little clip of that book. The names are all messed up on here. We end up correcting a lot of them later. And he comes back and he says, I found the brothers. They're in a church.
The what?
I found the brothers. They're in this church, in these church records. I have found them. And the church is located in a town called Telby or Telda. I'm not quite sure exactly how to pronounce it. It's either Telby or Telda. Telby? It's Telby? Okay. And because I've heard both, and so I'm kind of going back and forth. So if I'll use Telby as a name. And so they find it in Telby, and there's this church there called San Juan Bautista in the heart of Telby. And it's one of the oldest churches there. And he finds the records there. of them born. He corrects me on their dates. He tells me when they were baptized. He tells me they got married there. He tells me who their wives were, their official names were, all the way. They told me what their children's actual full names were. I thought this was the breakthrough I needed, and it sure was. It really was. This was absolutely amazing. He had run across my website. It was the website that got me the connection to the Canaries in this case, which I'll come back and talk about a little bit later and how important that is.